what was surprising is that we've had such long-standing customers that have taken so many classes. So, for example, we had a customer the other day that wrote in and said they took over 700 classes and how that made them feel super inspired and motivated and energized. And I thought that was just really amazing to see. And so it just lights me up to come to work because I see these.
Today's guest is Danielle Doremus. She is the Senior Director of Business Operations and CX at ClassPass, a fitness and wellness app that makes it so you can book a variety of fitness classes with one monthly subscription. For the past year, she's focused on implementing AI chat and agent assistance, reducing cost per contact by 42%, while also balancing that with genuine customer interaction. Beyond that, she's been testing upsell and new revenue generation via support, and she got her start in advertising sales, but she was a pure bar instructor and wanted to marry those interests. And ClassPass was a perfect match. Danielle, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
So, when you started your career in customer experience, what was one of the first things that you learned, good or bad?
Yeah, I think what's really important is people remember how you make them feel. As you know, in customer experience, people, if they don't have a good interaction, they'll go to the social channels and they'll talk about their grievances. So it's super important to try to at least make the customer feel heard in those interactions. And so that's something I always have my team remember is people are going to remember how you make them feel, even if you can't necessarily give them what they're asking for, try to give them something else that they can take away even if it's like proactive empathy or listening. It's so important.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's one of these things that, it's not the first time I've heard this advice before, but it's so true. And I'm glad that you mentioned it because I think it's easy to kind of forget. In the business world, we always get kind of focused in on the rational, get driven towards, what are the numbers, that sort of thing. But
Totally.
the emotional component, I think is one of the big reasons a lot of people get into support and get into CX generally. And that's such an opportunity if you can kind of remember that and use that.
Definitely.
Um, one of the questions here is, kind of around the balance between these two things, right? So, obviously as a business, there's metrics, there's KPIs, there's stuff that you got to track and optimize. But there is that human intuition and genuine connection as well. How do you think about that balance?
Yes. So I think you can always set the guardrails and create the policies, but there's human intuition is so important. So for example, we have policies for various things at ClassPass, but there's always going to be these edge cases that we might not be able to call out in those policies. And so I tell the team really practice your human intuition. Think through, does this make sense for the customer? And then we can figure it out in the QA rubrics or what have you. But I always stress that there's going to be those edge cases that you have to think about. So you're absolutely right.
And one of the things that I know you're working on is testing upsell and new revenue generation.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a challenge there historically in this function of attributing, right? We
Mm.
know from firsthand experience that, a good customer support interaction can boost retention, for example, or maybe you could recommend a product to somebody that solves their need. How do you think about attribution?
Yes, so I think it's so interesting because obviously it always ties back to retention and that's what the CX team is really known for. But what we are testing is that upselling component. And I'm really excited about it. It's very early. We launched it last week, but we're seeing if the CX team can first solve the customer interaction, earn the right to upsell, and then upsell them to a better plan, perhaps with additional credits, like as an incentive. And it gives them the opportunity to first tell the customer about our product and maybe why they should be on a higher credit plan, and then give them this kind of unique offer through CX. So I think it's really interesting because it sometimes it's hard to attribute CX directly outside of the retention, but we want to see if we can create this revenue arm as well.
Got it. And then just digging in a little bit, I mean, if let's say, for example, that interaction goes well, the customer agrees to sign up for a higher tier plan. Does your team make a note of that? Is there a button they click? Kind of how does that work?
So my team makes a note of it within the system. So we actually tag it within Zendesk. and then we make the change in our backend system, and that way we can attribute it directly to CX, which has been really helpful and a very good visual for the team to get excited and inspired as well.
Yeah, I think it's always nice if you can pull out the data and show like, hey, look, guys, we got this done, right?
Exactly, exactly. We have a
Nice.
meter, a little sales meter, and showing all the revenue that they're able to generate, which is really awesome.
Yeah, that's exciting. Um, what's when you started at ClassPass or just throughout your career in general, like what's something that was really surprising or really unexpected about CX for you?
At ClassPass specifically, just something that was surprising.
Sure.
Um, I guess like what was surprising is that we've had such long-standing customers that have taken so many classes. So, for example, we had a customer the other day that wrote in and said they took over 700 classes and how that made them feel super inspired and motivated and energized. And I thought that was just really amazing to see. And so it just lights me up to come to work because I see these stories of like how many classes these people have been able to take over our lifetime as a business and how it's truly changed their lives. So I think that's like the
Great.
one thing that's really different with the CX team at ClassPass.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, just I had not heard of ClassPass before we started talking, but I'm really excited about the idea of it because I always like variety. You know,
Yeah.
I always like to do a lot of different things, and if I was going to go to the same gym every day and do the same routine every day, I mean, I'd be bored out of my mind, right? But being able to switch it up sounds great. Like I'm excited. You know, it sounds like perfect fit for me. So
You need to download it. Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
people want variety, they want change, and fitness is hard. People will fall off the wagon and get back on the wagon. They change their interests. It allows them that flexibility.
Definitely. One of the challenges I think with a business like yours is that you've got these different kinds of customers, right? So you know, customer in air quotes, right? There's the businesses themselves, which you have some interaction with, right? There's
Yep.
the kind of end user, consumer user, and I believe you have enterprise or corporate clients as well now. How do you think about kind of managing all these different groups of people and giving them all a good experience?
Yeah. It's interesting because it's definitely a marketplace where there's multiple facets of the marketplace. You could even think about serving the ClassPass entity as a whole. So we're always thinking about how do we balance the needs of all of our customers and make sure that we're highlighting exactly what they're asking for within the inquiries and pushing for what makes sense for the business as well. So it is such a careful balance between the ecosystem to ensure that everyone is kind of getting what they need from it.
Got it. And do you digging in a little bit here, do you have a separate knowledge base or do you tag things separately for those different groups or do you kind of pull from the same place?
Yes, the data is so key. So we tag everything separately. We have milestone tags for these different groups. We actually have our so for our businesses, it's a different system. We use Salesforce versus Zendesk. But yes, it's different tagging and different support teams as well for that business line.
Got it. And before we started recording today, you mentioned that you introduced Decagon as your kind of AI chat tool. Can you talk a little bit about that process and how you're using that together with both Zendesk and Salesforce?
Yes. So in 2023, we were using a bot that was very much recipe based. It wasn't generative, and it kicked off kind of a larger RFP process for us to look for a generative bot. And we
Hmm.
threw, I think, 12 different vendors through our RFP process, really evaluated kind of all the players in the space. And we aligned on Decagon, one of the newer players in the space. And we launched them in early January of 2024, and it's been fantastic. I mean, we have them as our chatbot. We also use our agent assist feature, and we use them on our customer line as well as our business line. Very seamlessly have they integrated with Zendesk and Salesforce. That's made it really simple for us to use. And then we've worked internally with our product and engineering teams to connect various APIs so it can take action and automate some of the inquiries that are coming in.
Got it. And if you were going to give other people advice, you know, people who are evaluating vendors, people who are looking at bringing on a tool, what are some of the things that you would tell them to look out for or to be careful of?
Yes. So I think it's really important to kind of figure out how much control you're looking for. So there's two, it seems to us there was two different ways you could set up these bots. One was intent based, so you'd build out each individual intent, or you would have it ingest kind of all the knowledge center articles, all the 100% QA tickets, and then kind of answer everything it could and then escalate what it couldn't. We thought the latter was better for us because we could stand up quickly and then be able to iterate. So if you want more control, I would say maybe the intent based one would be easier because it would only do what you set it up to do. So that's one thing. I also think these vendors have varying amounts of platforms. So there's different like database and platforms that they pull from, and then also just the information they can give you. So one thing that was a huge selling point for us with Decagon is how much metadata we are going to get access to. I can click in to so many specific things really quickly, just as you would with ChatGPT when you're searching ChatGPT, similar with our actual inquiries, which has been so beneficial. So that was
Hmm.
a big selling point. And then the third piece is we were looking for something that also had agent assist because we wanted to stand that up quickly. And agent assist was pulling from the same databases that we had set up on the chatbot. So because Ecagon already had that, it was super seamless for us.
Got it. Nice. Yeah, I think there's so many AI tools out there today, and every vendor has, us included, by the way, but every vendor has their own kind of, um, you know, their own mix, right? Their own kind of special recipe, and there's
Totally.
these different little, nuances and different focuses. I think that there's probably a best fit vendor for every organization out there.
Agreed.
Um, and it seems like you really were very thorough about this um, at ClassPass. What was the if you don't mind, like what was the kind of the thought process internally? How did leadership kind of think about this? And you said you went through this big RFP process with 12 different vendors. Um, can you give us behind the scenes a little bit of what was going on inside of the organization, not so much about the actual tools themselves?
Yeah, I think the main reason why we started this RFP process is because we were using that recipe bot and we weren't getting much deflection, if anything, to be honest. And
Hmm.
so we wanted something to replace that. And there had been so much new technology that had come out recently. And our executive team is super bullish on AI and wants us to push the needle there. So having their support was really helpful.
Got it.
But it was just more for us. We wanted better results than what we were seeing and thought there was a lot of different, to your point, a lot of new technology, a lot of new vendors out there.
Got it. Yeah, I think, especially going into the beginning of last year, we saw this massive wave
Yeah.
where all the new AI APIs had come out. ChatGPT
Mhm.
obviously is this tidal wave of adoption. Um, I think that there's a lot of opportunities. There's also a lot of challenges with AI. And one of the things I think that you pointed out is this need for really high quality knowledge management.
Yes.
With AI, there's this kind of garbage in, garbage out problem.
Yeah.
How do you think about the pressure on knowledge management in this current environment?
So important. Yeah. So what we actually did before launching our bot is go through every single article. And thankfully I have a dedicated person who can work on this, but we went through every single article, scrubbed it, made sure it was accurate before we ingested it into the bot. And that took a couple months, to be honest, because we had to go through everything. And I
Hmm.
think that's just so important. Even now, I mean, we could tweak certain things with the bot, and if we say the wrong thing the wrong way, it could say the wrong thing. So it's just so important to be really religious about that.
Got it. Yeah, I think this is one of the big concerns that I think a lot of people have is the risk of the bot going off the rails, so to
Mhm.
speak, for
Mhm.
whatever reason, right? It could be a kind of a quote unquote pure hallucination where it's just totally imagined something and it's not your fault as a team. You haven't done anything wrong in your knowledge base, but the bot just goes off the rails. I think that's happening less now.
Mhm.
But when you think about this kind of this risk of AI, what are some of the things that you've been doing to mitigate that, or yeah, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah. So Yes, that's definitely a concern. If you've heard the horror stories in the news, obviously, about AI is going off the rails. So, what we've actually done is put a lot of checks and balances in place. And so, I actually have dedicated people who are QAing the bot, and about 9 agents today are doing this and reading through tickets, reading through all the 1 to 2 rated tickets, low rated scores on the CSAT scale, and then also just checking for general knowledge and making sure it's not saying anything crazy. And thankfully, we haven't had any hallucinations that are like that. But I do think because we have those checks in place, it's been reassuring for me as a leader to ensure that we're not sending crazy things out there into the universe.
Definitely, definitely. That makes sense. And um, I think you're taking a really an AI forward approach, having a lot of people bought into this process, a lot of people involved in QA. Um, this function is kind of developing, in real time around, operating these tools, right? And I think that there's going to be more roles, and some of my other guests have mentioned this, but there's going to be more of this role developing around support operations and support engineering,
Yeah.
specifically as it relates to, kind of managing and optimizing these AI tools. How do you think about the development of those roles over time?
Yes. So it's very needed and very clear. We actually have developed a strategy and ops and AI role where I have a technical PM who's overseeing the bot as well. And so there is more resources put towards it. So yes, you can save in other areas, but I would say for any CX leader looking to do this, so you definitely want to pencil some of that to go into some of these newer roles to continue to ensure that the bot is being one, upkept with all the major information that it needs, but then also like the QA role, for example.
Hmm. Definitely. Um, so we've talked quite a bit about AI today. I wanted to hear a little bit about, just sort of if you have any stories about like a real human interaction, like a real, the handwritten note, something like that. Can you share any of those stories with us?
Yeah, I think going back to the beginning, hearing the stories of how many people have taken classes, they love to share that and the milestones they've had. And there's countless ones of them just changing their life because being able to use ClassPass and going to classes that make them feel better and make them happier and more confident. So there's countless ones of those. It's interesting you mentioned that too, because I'm starting to think about, can the team send these kind of surprise and delight interactions via pen and paper or something that's a little bit more unique to the experience and make the customer feel heard. So we're thinking about implementing that actually this week or next week.
Great. Yeah, I think, with the rise of AI, it creates other opportunities,
I
and
totally
it shifts like um, it shifts expectations that people have as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think, I mentioned before, I think you agree that, it puts pressure on knowledge management. So it changes, the support process, operations internally. There's all these changes internally that happen, but there's also changes that are happening in the mind of the customer, right? Expectations that the customers have. And if you've got this super efficient, super reliable, AI support, and every company is adopting this at some level, some are ahead, some are behind, but
Right.
customers begin to expect that, and then it becomes normal, and now a handwritten note feels even more special,
Right. It's
right?
like going above and beyond for the experience. I'm pushing my managers now today, thinking through how can we surprise and delight them in so many different ways? Because to your point, so much of it's automated now. So there needs to be like even one more step further. And I do think little things like a handwritten note can go a long way for a customer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking also about, the I mean, maybe it's not specific to ClassPass, but generally speaking, there's so much. Obviously, everybody's online, everybody works on a computer. There's all this AI content out there,
Right.
and I think that there's a return to people valuing authenticity and human interaction. So
Mhm.
maybe like in person, right? Physical paper, right? Like these kind of there's kind of like a going back to the old way of doing things, but it's like an opportunity, right? How do you see like what's the best case scenario here?
For AI and human interaction interplaying
Like
together.
what it unlocks and what it makes possible or what it makes new again.
Oh, absolutely. So we've been given so much time back because the AI has been able to automate so many of these tasks. And so I think there's opportunities for the team to think creatively about how do we better serve the customer. We've actually specialized a lot of our agents now because they have more time. So thinking through how do we better serve the corporate client, for example, who also comes through our channel, but it's very different. And so we're thinking through what we can do there and create like almost like tiger teams around it. And then think through these surprise and delight features that we can give them as well. So yes, I think AI gives us kind of unlocks this ability to give us this specialization and opportunity to be a little bit more human with our customers.
Yeah, it's kind of a paradox, but I think there's something that feels really good about that.
Yeah.
And also, I think is, you know, it's just it feels necessary,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if
Yeah.
we're always talking about AI, we're always talking about efficiency.
Mhm.
It just feels like something's a little bit lacking, right?
Right. Exactly. And I mean, quite frankly, sometimes the person doesn't want to talk to the AI bot.
Sure.
Even if it can resolve their inquiry rather quickly, they still push for that human interaction with the agent on the other side. So there's just going to be some customers who don't want to talk to an AI bot, and we need to figure out how to facilitate a good interaction for them as well.
Definitely. One thing that I've been picking up on some businesses are doing, is this normally in B2C, let's say a hypothetical company that's selling toothpaste or something, a high volume, you know, uh, low cost item. They can't spend a lot on each sport interaction. Um, but there's kind of this inversion that's happening in some businesses where normally it would just be this real transactional, real simple support, but they're moving towards a kind of an automated customer success, sort of a
Mhm.
scalable customer success. And then at the same time, B2B or people with corporate clients like ClassPass are adding a self-serve component. You see what I mean? So that normally it would be customer success, really hands-on relationships for the corporate clients exclusively, and just transactional support for the others. But it's becoming a blend or kind of inverting. Is that something you've seen, or how do you think about this?
I don't think we've seen that as much at ClassPass. I think we are thinking about how do we unlock self-service for our clients where it makes sense. Like why they don't have to talk to us or they want to do it themselves. It's almost like we're creating friction by having them talk to the agent. So we
Hmm.
are thinking about, okay, how do we unlock self-service in that capacity? But I do think it's an interesting play because you have to kind of figure out what the need is of that customer and then still service them. And I do believe that AI is helpful for servicing those quick interactions that are really just automated tasks. And I mean, I personally would just want to work with an AI if I can get it done in 2 seconds and not have to talk to an agent or anything. So it's just trying to figure out where to put that technology, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. I think, even the most support focused, the companies that invest the most in support, they want to provide self-service as an option, right?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, cost is always a factor for a company, no matter how big it is. And so thinking about where you want to spend your resources is just so important.
Definitely. Um, okay, so um, when you compare ClassPass to maybe some of the previous places that you've worked,
Mhm.
um, is there something that really stands out to you about ClassPass's approach to customer support?
Yes, I think, well, one, I think everyone who works at ClassPass is incredibly passionate about the mission. It's just something that we're all energized by, and it's different working for this business when you're really servicing customers to feel better and have happier, more fulfilled lives. So I think that's one thing that stands out. The second thing that stands out is a lot of companies are going back to office. ClassPass has completely rotated the other way, and our CEO actually came out and made a pretty strong stance that we will go fully remote and stay fully remote. And we're completely dispersed in multiple countries. And so I do think that is also very unique to ClassPass is that we are really heading in the remote first environment, and if not, diversifying and spreading out even more.
Interesting. What do you think is driving that?
I think there's just so much talent. I mean, we have employees all over the globe and they're phenomenal. So I think going out of just the US and thinking, can we hire amazing people elsewhere, has been a really big drive. And we've done a very successful job of doing that.
Got it. Yeah, I certainly think that there's some organizations. I mean, if you work at a hospital, you can't like
You
can't
can't
like
do that.
outsource that, right? But there's a lot of things where it does actually benefit. And like you said, access to talent, globally, right? I think
Right.
that there's always going to be a trade-off there between the kind of the easiest way to communicate with somebody
Mhm.
might seem to it people will think that that's going to be face to face. That's the default, right? If we're in the same room together, it's going to be the easiest.
Right.
And I think things can get lost a little bit if you don't set up right for remote work to kind of boost communication. Have you had any challenges around this, and how do you think about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think the challenges early on is when we were kind of doing more of a hybrid where some people were in office and within a conference room and talking amongst themselves, and some people were on Zoom screens. That was a challenge because then you can't hear everything. You don't feel like you're as engaged. Now that we've gone fully remote and barely anyone is in office, it's very different because it's kind of like us talking today, where we're very face to face, in my opinion. And we're all used to it. So I do think it depends on kind of how the setup is. And I think if everyone's remote, it feels the same and it feels like a face to face interaction now.
Got it. Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I think one of the things that I think is really important for support to communicate internally inside of the function, but also across the organization, is VOC, right? Voice of customer is this incredible resource, and it should be part of almost every conversation, every business decision. It's like, what do customers actually say? What's trending, right? What has changed recently? How do you think about VOC at ClassPass?
It's incredibly important. So we actually have someone who is dedicated to building out the VOC every single month for us. We have a very robust case categorization. And actually, I know I mentioned this before, but Decagon's platform automatically tags via our case categorization all the incoming tickets. So we have everything from them as well in this tagging infrastructure so we can understand what customers are saying, what their pain points are. And it gives us a lot of data to understand where to change our policies. Because then we can take that information and take it internally and say, hey, we got to change this. It's not working. And give us a lot of data points to act on. So I think it's incredibly important. And if you don't have a VOC or you don't have a good case tagging infrastructure, it's something you really need to set up.
Definitely. Um, you you've been singing Decagon's praises, and I'm happy to hear about these points that you really like about them. I think it's something for people to learn,
Yeah.
definitely. And I want to challenge you a little bit and just ask you, if you could change one thing or add one thing um, to the service that you've been getting,
Yeah.
what would you change?
Yeah, I think so. There's two things. So one, I think there's someone should go after the QA space in a way that is like fully automated. If we could just upload our QA rubric into some type of system and it can automatically tag all the tickets, it would be hugely beneficial. And so that's something that we've been thinking about. I don't know if they're going to do it or someone else will do it, but someone should. The
Hmm.
second is that it has taken a little bit longer for some of these API connections that we've been making with them. We've been able to do them successfully, but it does take some time. And I don't know if that's our product engineering team and how we want to do it securely or what have you. But those are just things that you have to anticipate as a leader, is it might take a little bit more time to roll those out as well.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I think the integration step, depending on how custom things are, security requirements, that can
Yeah.
always be tough.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that makes sense. And on the point about QA as well, I think contact analysis, response scoring, QA generally. I think there are some good providers out there that are working on that. I think forget the name. I think there's a company that's focused on that specifically. Um, but it certainly makes sense as a complementary kind of function.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely. I know our
when
QA provider is also looking at expanding the AI use case, but it's not necessarily to the point that I'm speaking to. It's more of
Mhm.
you can certain categories, and then it will do that for like 100% of the tickets. But for example, it doesn't have empathy or something like that. It's like very binary
Hmm.
versus upload the entire rubric in there and have it be done.
So there's been a lot of rapid evolution happening in AI, especially in the last couple of years. Um, what do you see as, maybe some of the gaps or some of the opportunities for the future?
Yeah, it's rapidly evolving. It's kind of crazy. You have to keep up. I mean, it was just a simple automation tool, and now it's actually solving customer inquiries. I was on a demo the other day for a voice bot, and it sounded like me, and it paused and said and likes, and it just sounded like a real person. There was no lagging, and it actually walked through like a complex refund. I'm shocked. So I think it will continue to evolve, and people are talking about when will it develop reasoning, for example. So it's just something that I want to make sure I stay on top of, and always am up to date on the latest technology and what's available to us to test.
Got it, definitely. Um, do you see some other specific area that's kind of an untapped opportunity, something that can really improve the CX landscape?
So maybe not like an untapped opportunity for the wider industry, but for us specifically at ClassPass, something I would love to use AI for is kind of like a concierge bot within our app. So, for example, people who are booking on ClassPass in major metropolitan areas sometimes are competing for certain spots at top studios. And we would love to have an app, a bot within the app that says, hey, I noticed you're trying to book at so and so studio, but here's another amazing studio that maybe doesn't have as much brand recognition, but has a comparable experience that we can service up to that person. So they don't have to think about it. So maybe you, Ben, don't know where you want to go yet, and we can just tell you. So I'd love to use AI in that capacity.
That sounds great. Yeah, I think, even if there's openings available, if I have, 10 different options, I don't really know where to start, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's a challenge for people. And so if we can just help walk through that experience for them, then I would love to do that.
Yeah, that's great. I would definitely be happy to have a feature like that myself if I was,
A
probably will
user.
become a ClassPass customer here in the future.
I love to hear it.
Um, so what are some, just talking a little bit about the future here, what are some exciting things that are coming up? Is there any, big events, milestones, any projects you want to share with us?
Yeah, I can't speak to specifics, but I know that we have some exciting partnerships coming up. And then in March, we do like our Best of ClassPass feature, which we feature some of our top businesses. And it's really great ways to recognize our businesses. So I would definitely keep the eyes out for that and maybe try booking at one of those studios.
Got it. And just for people listening, what's the availability of ClassPass? Is it nationwide? Is there limited markets or?
It's nationwide. There's certain markets. It's usually in major metropolitan areas, but we also are in some suburbs as well. And then we're actually in 30 plus countries too. So if you're traveling and you want to use ClassPass, you can as well.
So it's that same membership, but you can even go international.
Anywhere. Yeah,
Oh,
you
that's
could use it
huge.
in San Francisco and New York, anywhere you want to go.
Nice. All right. Um, so just closing out the episode here, I wanted to ask you, do you have any tips or advice for people in their CX career to move forward to take that next step?
Yes. So, I mean, I've been talking to a lot of my friends in the industry, and some people are still hesitant about adding AI to their CX org. I would say lean in. I think it's so important to one, understand all the different use cases, the different vendors out there, but also it's going to continue to evolve. And I think everyone's going to use it eventually. So you might as well get on board now and just at least try it and figure out how to use it for your organization. So I would say lean in for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my comment on this is that AI is another technology in the long history of technology, and the pattern is very clear. Like the people who lean in and find an opportunity in it are the ones that benefit, and you know we know what happens if you don't.
I know, right? So don't lean out, lean in. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
But there's also those opportunities on the flip side of this that we
Yeah,
mentioned, right? Going back to more of a human connection as well.
yeah. Let's figure out how to use that time. that you get back.
Definitely. All right, Danielle, thanks so much for joining today. It's really been a pleasure to talk to you. I've definitely got some notes here for myself to look into and explore. And yeah, for everybody out there, be sure to check out ClassPass and up your fitness game. So
Awesome.
thank you, and we'll see you next time on the CX Files.
Thanks, Ben.